Let the record show that all 7 trustees are in attendance, and this meeting has been duly called, and notice of this meeting has been duly posted for time and manner required by law. I do want to apologize, we had a technical difficulty there, and we're running about 13 minutes late, but normally we try to start these on time. First item on our agenda will be closed session. We don't have a reason to go to closed session for the workshop this evening, so I'm going to move to item 3, which will be our open forum, be hearing from individuals or committees. We have 4 individuals signed up to speak tonight. I'm going to call in no particular order. Mr. Authier, Matt Authier, if you will please step forward, state your name and address for the record, please. You will have 5 minutes to speak, and I will give you a notice when you have approximately 1 minute remaining and then approximately 30 seconds.
Cool. I don't think I'll take that full time. Board, thanks for having this workshop, and mainly just here to offer a word of encouragement. I've sat in your position when you get ready to call for a bond that addresses growth in the district, and it's not a fun place, a lot of sleepless nights and things that you think about. And while I didn't serve on this long-range planning committee, I did look at the committee's charge, and I just want to reiterate that. It says the Waxahachie ISD Long-Range Facilities Planning Committee is charged by the Board of Trustees to, in the spirit of making the strategic plan, to do the following. Prioritize the needs of all WISD students and make decisions that will enable students to receive a premier education. Represent the expectations and values of the community. Consider projects that will provide a safe and secure educational setting for students and staff, and make recommendations that enhance the district's capacity to provide conditions for quality teaching and learning within the parameters of fiscal capacity and responsibility. I think it's exciting this go around that you guys have a plan set forth by members of the community that worked for 8 or 10 months to put that plan together to address the growth that's facing our district. As board members, I think that's a crutch that you can lean on. You're not having to come up with everything yourself, and I think that's a good thing as a board, is for a community to say, here's what we need. This isn't a bond, in my opinion. The recommendations by the committee, after looking at them, these aren't full of wants. These are things that we desperately need. If we look back, we've been using in a group of supporters that have been gathering, have been using the word hinge. Like, we view that this moment hinges, the district hinges on what happens in the next couple months. When we look back, I've got a kid that's, the youngest is in 1st grade. And when I look back in 5 years, what did we do today in order to make sure that him and his classmates, like this says, a premier education? What are we doing with the decisions that we make, the things that we put before the community to offer a premier education? And so I know you guys, as you package this thing, and I'm not here to talk about propositions or anything like that, but as you package it, don't worry about maybe the little thing that a group of naysayers may jump on you guys about, but worry about what impacts kids. Does that proposition, or however you structure it, does it impact kids to provide a premier education? I think if you guys can answer the question yes to whatever structure you guys put together, if you can answer yes to that question, then you've done your job. And so I'm here to encourage you guys. I'm excited about it. I just left a meeting of 25 people that are excited about it. Whatever you guys put together, we're behind you. We understand it's difficult to package that thing together, and you got a short time to do it. But just know that this community is ready for it. We understand it. And again, it's not a package full of wants. These are things we desperately need. So I appreciate you guys.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Randy Coppett. Step forward, state your name and address for the record, please. You'll have approximately 5 minutes to speak. I'll let you know when you have a minute, and also 30 seconds remaining, okay?
Thank you. I'm Randy Coppett, and I live at 102 Pinto Drive. I grew up here in Waxahachie, so Waxahachie is me. It's my blood and everything like that. I have a son that's a sophomore. I have 2 older boys that have already graduated. I raised them in Garland. It was time to move home. Parents getting older, and you're just like, okay, it's time to get back home. So my youngest son was right at that verge of switching from junior high to high school. I said, let's get you established. Waxahachie is going to be way better than Garland District, and let's get home. He's been involved with baseball and football to keep him active and to keep him out of trouble. I mean, we all know the busier the kids are, less time they have to find trouble. Let's be honest. Not all families have the luxury of having 2-parent households. Some have working moms, nonstop working dads, we all raise them. It takes a village, and Waxahachie is our village. With that being said, I take this, sorry, I can never speak in front of people, so this tells you the passion I have to come forward. I feel that we need to get our football players back to the high school. What I mean by that is we waste time getting them to and from the high school, back from the stadium and things like that. There's so many things that can go wrong. We're short on teachers, substitutes, bus drivers, and things like that. That's time where these kids can actually be focused on what they need to be focusing on, keep them out of trouble, to be quite honest. Because when there's a lag of free time, they're gonna find trouble. They're gonna sneak off real quick and chit chat, miss the bus to get over to the stadium. My son's a sophomore, he's on JV, going up to varsity. So proud of him. We've got a great coaching system that is amazing to have, that cares for these boys. So I just ask that y'all help us continue caring for our boys. Let's think of their safety. Some parents do have that luxury of having an extra vehicle to get their children where they need to be on their own because of work and things like that. Some children don't. We're very blessed in this community to have very giving parents. If you say you need help, we're gonna be there. I'm not a board member of the quarterback club, but I am a member of the quarterback club. Those boys, I don't know how many boys I have, to be quite honest. I've given birth to 3, but I have hundreds and hundreds of boys. I've taken them home because their parents just didn't frankly care how they got home or how they got to school or games. And that breaks my heart. We need to be able to give to these kids things that they need: safety, security. We have field houses that the floors aren't even level. So if you're anything in there and you're lifting, you could fall backwards. You could hit your head. That weight could land on you. It's not a level or safe place for us. That comes a liability on the school district. That's a liability in health situations for those parents that may or may not have insurance for their kids. That's something we need to take into consideration. My son has come home, and teenagers, they will find a reason to complain, of course. But he has come home and complained about that their equipment is not washed properly, that they have to work out in, but they're not allowed to take it home to wash. We can't even take other kids' homes to wash theirs. So it's nasty and mildewy, and they have to just work through it because blood, sweat, and tears, it's what you do for what you love. I know that the busing takes, I think it takes them probably 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes sometimes to get from the high school once you're finally loaded up and over to the school. From the school to the stadium, pardon me. And then you have to get them back on track. We have children that have learning disabilities and they get distracted with anything. It's going to take them time to get back on track. We haven't received any money, and again, I moved back from Garland 4.5 years ago now. And that bond from 2010, the football has not received anything from that since then. I think some of these funds that they need to go back to our boys. We have a beautiful high school that, yes, it is overcrowded and we've outgrown, but we need to be able to get those boys back to that high school and make it feasible for them to be there. And I appreciate y'all's time, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Katie Warsing. You will state your name and address for the record, please. You will have approximately 5 minutes to speak. I'll let you know when we have a minute left in about 30 seconds, okay?
Perfect, thank you. Hey, y'all. I'm Katie Warsing. I live at 313 Lakeshore Drive. And my story is a little bit similar to hers, except that my kids are the 5th generation born and raised here in Waxahachie. And that's something that we're real deeply proud of. A couple of years ago, we had to move to California for 2 years for my husband's business. And we moved back last February through May to get us all here. But there was no other place that we considered coming back to. He works in Corsicana, so I mean, there were a lot of opportunities for us to not come back to Waxahachie, honestly. But there was no other place that felt like home. And that is a dream of when other outsiders look at our community, that's what they want. They want a place that feels like home. And this does, and that's why people don't leave for 5 generations. That's why people come back. So what I would like to suggest is, like she said, that we get our boys back on campus. Our whole theme right now is limitless. Mr. Authier used the word premier program. Coach Tolley uses elite. Whatever term you want to throw at it, that's what we're all here for. That's what the goal of all of ours is. But it takes the facilities to get to that elite, premier, limitless program that we're all looking for, whether it's through education, whether it's the football program, or any of the other sports, or band, or choir, or whatever. Let's give the kids and the coaches or choir teachers what they need to give these kids the best opportunity to leave this place and be proud of where they came from. There is a kid, first of all, let me say, I have a senior who's graduating this year, I have a sophomore who played on varsity this year, and I have a 4th grader. So all of the money that is going to be proposed in this bond, it really isn't going to serve my big 2 guys, right? But my 4th grader coming up, it's going to be for him. It's going to be for all of those kids. And so it is, it's going to impact thousands of kids if we can get a weight room at WHS. I know that there's also going to be likely another high school. If these are going to be 2 6A high schools and the new high school is going to have all of these elite, premier, limitless facilities, then why are we going to have our direct competition with WHS be lacking? One of the things that I really love and admire about Coach Tolley is that he understands the vision that the football program is the front porch of this community. When we bought our season tickets this year, it made me proud to invest in something that just wasn't about me going to see my 2 kids on the field. It was about being something bigger than me. And that's what this affords us. And as a community, as parents, I love the roar of the stadium. It makes my heart race. It gets me flushed. And to know that Coach Tolley came to my 4th graders football game, I have a picture on my phone right now of him kneeling down and putting a hand up on his shoulder and just talking to him. And he didn't know that that was Tate Gavin's little brother. It was just another kid, because he did that with several of them.
30 seconds.
He loves those kids. We need to give this coach, or any coach, the facilities and the equipment that they need to do their job well and to be that limitless program that we all want to see. Thank y'all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, our last speaker, Caroline Ford. Did you state your name and address for the record, please? You have 5 minutes to speak. I'll let you know when you have a minute and also when you have 30 seconds, okay?
Well, I'm Caroline Ford. I live at 319 East Marvin. There's really not much else to say what they have not already said. I mean, if their passion doesn't convince you that we need these boys back on the WHS campus, you know, I don't know what else we can say besides throwing the fact that we've spent $50,000 a year to bus those kids back and forth. They lose 2 hours of competition time. That's given Duncanville and DeSoto 20 hours a season, if not more, over us. The washer and dryer situation, I got the privilege to work on that 2010 bond. And it was a hard bond to pass, to renovate Lumpkin Stadium. It was a downturn in the economy, a lot like the one we're seeing now. And we went in, we knew what we had to do, and we got it passed. That was the last time football received major funds to the organization. The perception is football gets everything. Football is big in Texas, but they really have not received everything they should have in the past 13 years. With the new high school, I know it perceived they were getting so much, but they have not been taking advantage of those facilities there. So with us being a growing and thriving and limitless district, we have a coach that's thriving. We're on the, what did you say, the hinge of thriving. I'm looking for a state title within the next 3 years. And I think the only way to do that is to get them in the proper facilities. Renovating Lumpkins is a great idea. I was on the LRPC that we proposed that to you all. But I wish we would have had the chance to discuss, hey, why not take that 6.6 million and put it at the high school? Let's renovate that indoor activity center. Make it a huge locker room, weight room, whatever we need to do to that building to make it a limitless athletic facility for our kids. We can put another practice field out there. There's options for making that an indoor-outdoor practice field. So I just want you all to think about some things outside of just renovating Lumpkins. Because I know Grapevine has their stadium where one is home to there and the other one's across town, but their high school is close to there. So they're not busing, they're not losing competition time or practice time. So let's think of some other ways that we can maybe get our kids back to our high school so the Indians are at home, and then whatever the next ones are, they'll be at their campus as well. And let's start both campuses being equal and helping them thrive and be limitless. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, sir, I can. I will just say thank y'all very much and very much appreciate the feedback and the input on this process. I will tell you, I think as we go through the presentation today, you'll hear some conversation about how it is that we might be able to address some of the concerns that you're talking about. I believe we're in the process right now of hiring a new athletic director, and I think that's going to be an important component for us to help that person, allow that person to be able to come in and help us shape what that future is going to look like. Because there's two things that we're really trying to address, and you'll hear more about this. We're trying to address the issue of how do you prepare Lumpkins for two high schools competing there. And that's one piece. But there's obviously a bigger piece that we heard y'all talk about today, which is how do we address eventually getting our boys back on the WHS campus. And so I think that's a piece where we've had some conversation with the board where we will commit to bringing to the board a plan by the summer. You know, because we're going to hire a new athletic director, let that person help us shape what that plan looks like, bring that to the board by the summer, where we address that very piece. Here is our vision of how we can, in a reasonable amount of time, get our boys back on campus. So, okay.
All right, that'll conclude our open forum. We'll move into item 4, our workshop, which is our bond preparation workshop.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Going into our workshop, we're going to talk about our bond proposal and kind of review that piece. Experts in the room today that I want y'all to be aware of. I want to thank Jonathan Alvis for being here today. Jonathan is our architect with VLK, principal architect. And we also have Jeff Gulbis, who is our bond attorney. And Jeff, thank you for being here as well. We appreciate both of y'all for making time to be present with us today. So just a quick recap, as much as for our audience at home as for y'all. I know y'all are very familiar with this, trustees. But this is a potential construction timeline. If everything were to go on time, as we would hope it would, these are the deliverables we could have by August of '24. You would have elementary number 10 opening up by August of '24. We would open a new Wildman Steam Academy building on a different piece of property from where Wildman currently is located. Once that Wildman building is vacated, we would propose to permanently return Global High School back to the Wildman building. We would have expansion of the Hancock building, which is where Global currently is, to house up to 1,200 kids. And then we'd move Coleman across the street to give Coleman a newer, better long-term home. Temporarily, we would propose to use the Coleman campus as a 9th grade center while we build Comprehensive High School number 2. August of '25, we believe that is a timeline when we could open an expanded Findlay, expanded to house up to 1,200 kids, open an expanded Howard. When we say expansions, and just to clarify, because this has come up with a couple of our teachers, we're talking about additions to the building, physically adding on to the building through construction. Expansion of Howard to house up to 1,200 kids, and then open up neighborhood elementary number 11. Throughout this process, we would have those facility upgrades taking place at all campuses throughout the district, with the exception of Simpson and at this time WHS. August of '26, we skip and we go to August of '27, which we believe is the earliest that we could open up Comprehensive High School number 2 on the land that we already have designated for that purpose. I've pointed out to our teachers and our staff, typically when you open a comprehensive high school, you don't typically open with all 4 grades on year 1. So you might start with freshmen and sophomores, or possibly just freshmen. Add a class the next year, add a class the next year, and so on. So really you're looking at probably the May of 29 or May of 30 before you would actually have a class of students walk the stage having graduated from that second comprehensive high school. That is also when we could, if we went with the original recommendations of the LRPC, open Lumpkins with preparations for 2 high schools, and then finally upgrades throughout the district. These are the price tags on the buildings as they have been developed by Mr. Aldis, our architect. One of the questions that comes up frequently from staff and may be relevant for the board to be sure and know is that all of these estimates on costs include inflation, and they're timed out. And so he actually has a formula where he includes a percentage of inflation per month as you go through. And so, for example, building Comprehensive High School number 2 is not something that's not going to start in June. In fact, you would start a whole planning process, and we wouldn't get to construction until 2 to 3 years into the process. And so he builds in inflationary factors, and so those are accounted in the cost that you see right here. And you see that your total cost down here is $576 million, $670,000. To pick up kind of where we left off last time, there are we have 2 bond propositions that we've lined out here for you. This is based upon conversation we had in our last bond workshop and based upon what I've heard from your feedback since then. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Calden and let him talk us through the next couple of bond proposition options.
All right, thanks, sir. Board, at the last meeting, I believe it was Mr. Schoolfield, but generally as we were talking, there was a little bit of concern about essentially what our presenters had talked about earlier, our community members. And with Lumpkins, that we weren't really addressing getting the high school students back to WHS, and that it wasn't full-fledged. So as Dr. Hollingsworth has kind of talked about a little bit, this is kind of where we ended last time, but we are looking at a different set of propositions that would not necessarily include Lumpkins renovations at this point, in favor of going back and redeveloping a plan with our new athletic director to fully solve all of these issues and not just keep doing little things here and there and punting the real problem, which would be getting our students back to WHS. So if you will, if you'll go to the next slide, sir. On this slide, this is option 2 of bond propositions. And what you'll notice is that category A is a little bit larger than what it was the last time we were talking, as we have taken that $6.6 million that was originally dedicated for Lumpkins renovations out of the LRPC recommendation and assigned it instead for future land sites, to buy some land for future sites for schools. That was one thing as we go through the LRPC recommendation that we did not include, or that did not come out of that group, was where, if we're going to build these sites, where are we going to put them? And we'll go through an exercise here in just a minute about the lack of land that we currently have as a district and how that's going to become a problem going forward. So realistically, the only major changes are no Proposition D on this for Lumpkins. Instead, we'd go back and develop a more comprehensive plan long-term of how to address Lumpkins and students at WHS. And in favor of that, adding that to educational facilities for land. Still have comprehensive high school number 2 and still have facility upgrades or improvements as its own proposition. The one thing that Mr. Autry, last time we were specifically, you were asking questions about, could we do Lumpkins out of M&O? And I gave you all kinds of hesitation about that. But one thing that gives me a little more comfort is having a long-range plan of knowing exactly what we are going to be doing and solving, and so that we can work on that in phases and bits, so that it can be part of M&O budget if we need it to be, but also having these facility upgrades as their own separate proposition. Because remember last time we were talking about, in the last 6 years, we spent over $6 million on facility upgrades and renovation and enhancements, and so at $1 million a year, that's eating up a significant chunk of our budget. So if we can kind of get ahead of that curve a little bit by doing these renovations of more timely things, fire alarm systems, roofing systems, etc., then that would free up some more money for us to help address those concerns with Lumpkins and returning football to WHS. Next slide, please. One thing that this is our working estimate at the moment. Right now, we believe that if all $576 million of this bond proposal were to be approved, that we'd be looking at about a 3-cent tax increase. That would be moving our current 38-cent INS rate up to 41 cents. That's not out of bounds with our peers. A lot of our fast-growing peers are going to be a lot closer to 50 cents. Not that, that's necessarily a celebratory tone, but what that would mean for the average household in Waxahachie ISD, the average house in Waxahachie ISD is valued at $326,000 and its taxable value of about $225,000. This would mean about 5.5 cents a month for the average household, $5.61 a month, if every project were approved and we increased the tax rate 3 cents. So if your taxable values are closer to $500,000 on your house, then it would be closer to about 11.25 cents per month. If it's half that, then you can, do the math and go the other way. But that was just kind of one of those things that, as we have worked through and we've put some estimations of what we think growth rate is going to continue to do, so growth and taxable values, we got to a point where we felt comfortable in saying this is realistically where we think we're going to be able to land on a tax rate if everything were to be approved. That is, again, keep in mind, we talked last time about spacing things out. We would not go issue $576 million in bonds in May of 2023. There's no way we could do that much in work. We would have to start really doing some serious arbitrage calculations, which could lead us to giving some money back to the IRS, which is not where we want to be. We want to be using that money for the purposes in which it was approved. So there would be a phased-in schedule over multiple years. Right now, thinking 3, it could even be 4, depending on the timing of second comprehensive high school. And so with that, we're able to incorporate additional growth values of taxable values. So it's not just 1 year of growth, we're factoring in 3 years of taxable value growth that is enabling us to reduce that tax increase if all the projects were to be approved. Are we okay on that? Okay.
think at this point, Mr. President, it would be, this is a good time for us to talk about propositions and where we're going to land.
So if I remember correctly, at our last workshop, I think we ended that everyone agreed, at least in principle, that we wanted a proposition solely for high school. Is that, do I remember that correctly?
Yeah.
So there you go. There's one down. Okay. So if I remember correctly, went around a survey and we kind of had a split on how many other propositions we wanted. So at least we know we can eliminate that particular topic. I would love to hear some input from the trustees on how you want to move forward on how we structure these other ones.
To me, there's three that are clear in my mind, and it's just John talking, but high school's one, renovations are two, and elementaries are three. And we can debate whether Wyoming could stand alone as a fourth. I don't have a real strong opinion either way on that. So, but I think those first three are a common denominator that I heard between us all.
So I like the look of three of them. You can make the case with anyone, but they're all pushing the ball forward on education and on space. And I think it'd be easier to get a win on all three of them, with people knowing it's all three needs that we have that are for education only, for space.
I'm not trying to complicate things, but we may come back and revisit the Lumpkin situation based on what Dr. Allingworth said versus so we may come back to that one later, but we'll do these three, just so when the crowd hears three, we're not talking about that specific part yet. Okay, anyone else?
You want me to speak?
Yeah, absolutely.
You
What is no
looked at me,
particular order?
Okay.
It's a workshop.
Well, so I have two things that I think that I just want to throw out there that I don't think they're new, but they're just things that I keep coming back to when people say we need to think about, kids first and making sure that our plans are about students first. One is student safety, of course. With our athletic programs, traveling has always been an issue that we've had, football, baseball, golf. I mean, it's always been something we've struggled with. I don't know exactly how we compare to other districts, but I do know that having our kids travel during a school day is just always a worry to me. It just always is. I can't get over that, kids driving themselves and then driving their friends and then driving two friends and three friends, which actually is against the law, but anyway, that's a big one for me. And then when it comes to our schools that at the elementary level are like the STEAM Academy and the Biomedical Academy, I think they're amazing concepts, but the question I've asked in the past is, the thing that bothers me the most is, when you set that up, I said, okay, are we telling parents, no, your kid can't go to school here? And the answer is yes. In my mind, we're a public school system, and I don't know. I mean, I get it that we tell someone, no, you can't go to this elementary school because you don't live in the zone. But when you have a school that's open to everyone through a lottery system or what have you, we're telling certain parents no. And I have had several, folks come to me and say that it feels like we're creating private schools in a way.
Well,
So
may I
anyway, those are
respond to
my,
that? So I want
Workshop.
to, I want to respond with, in a couple of
Sure,
ways on
sure.
that topic. This is a clear value of our district. Which one is, we value choices, and that is something
Right,
that's
no.
loud and clear from our community. In an effort to create more options for families that are appealing to families. Now, one of the things we've done this last year, y'all did that, is you helped us create a travel hub system that makes it where our students are not prohibited from participating at Wildman or at Marvin or any of these choices by transportation. Transportation does not keep them from being able to do that. So that's one thing you guys did that was very good to kind of level the playing field. But watering things down, where you don't ever do anything that's unique or innovative, which is another one, that's part of our vision, is not necessarily, I don't believe, the best way to move forward. Providing our families with options, giving them choices, allowing folks in a fair way to be able to apply and have interest. And remember too, one of the things you're talking about here with this plan is you're talking about expanding access. You're talking about Wildman currently, for example, if we just focus in on that, you've got 415 kids that can be served. Well, this plan will allow that to be doubled to 800 kids. So more families will have that opportunity. So I just, I don't think we should beat ourselves up over the fact that just because you're offering certain options that are really, really enticing to families, that's a bad thing.
Do we know how many are taking advantage of the
Transportation?
right, yeah.
Do you have an idea?
I don't have a specific number. I know that it's strong enough. We haven't considered canceling any of the routes.
Anyone else?
Dusty, did you say we're gonna come back to Lumpkins?
We're gonna try to tackle these three things first.
Okay.
Okay?
One of the things I would say, Mr. Rogers, you had talked about potentially pulling Wildman out as a separate part. I would just say, one of the things that was so clear and that we made very clear to the LRPC was the community wanted a plan. They didn't ask us to bring them, hey, we want 2 elementaries, a junior high, and a high school. It wasn't just, hey, give us the number of things you wanted. They very clearly asked for a plan. And that's what the LRPC did. And I would just say, I would caution against pulling Wildman out from where it is now. And the reason it's in there is because it's really one of those first dominoes in the whole plan. Because if you don't have a new place for Wildman to go, you don't have a place for Global to go. And you don't have a place for then Coleman to go, which was very deliberately set aside.
Yeah,
That's
we've
just one
definitely got to guard against that because the county got in a tight spot years ago when they passed a bond that one proposition hinged on the other one, and one passed and one didn't. And it just totally, it was an uh-oh moment.
Yes, sir, and those are not set up in a way where they would conflict with each other.
Right. But I also know that that was a topic of discussion. And since this is a workshop, we need to discuss all
Sure.
all possibilities. And like I said, I don't really feel strongly about it, but if the other 6 people do, so be it.
Yes, sir.
I'll give my 2 cents worth. As far as A as it's proposed there, I was in favor of splitting that up by, similar to what Mr. Rogers said. I felt more comfortable with 4 propositions, excluding anything for athletics at that time. But it's not something that I'm willing to die on the sword for. And if the other 5, 6 members feel strongly that they want to keep it intact that way, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm 100%. But my initial reaction was I would like to see that split up a little bit. But I'm here to get a bond called. I'm here for all us to be in unison. So how we want to move forward with that. I think C absolutely needs to be by itself. And not only does it need to be by itself, we discussed it at the last workshop that how we need to structure those particular bonds, how they're paid off in about a 10-year cycle. And I think it's very important that we let the public know. I don't know how you do that, but the public needs to know that those particular bonds are going to be paid off in an approximately 10-year bond cycle.
Yes, sir.
Next.
I struggle with A, and I struggle do you pull Wyman out of there or not? And my reason maybe, well, two reasons. One, I'm a business guy and the school costs a lot more than us. So I think that needs to be communicated. And I'm all about plans and I don't see a, for lack of a better word, a STEAM high school and a STEAM elementary. Where's the STEAM junior high? Where are we at on that? Because I mean, that's like, to me, that's like buying a car with 3 wheels. You know?
Well, the answer to where are we on that is that our STEAM program is popular enough, Mr. Schofield, that we would have, our plan is to offer STEAM options for kids at all 3 of our junior highs. And we're already working on that as we speak.
When I looked at it, I looked at it a little differently. I feel like that if we put the 2 neighborhood schools in and pulled Wyman out, that's just an option or a thought, then if the community did not, we love Wyman, we're not gonna get rid of it. But if the community were to not vote as proposition for Wyman, then we could easily move Wyman into another elementary. I mean, and that would send a clear message from the community that Wyman, you know, that they want Wyman to be the same, or the same dollar amount, or around the same dollar amount. And
When you say
we're
moving
about-
into another elementary, you're talking about moving it into
Moving-
building the
moving-
identical building to the other 2 new ones? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, no, if we pull Wyman out of the Proposition A, and then we still would have 2 elementaries. If Wyman, for some reason, did not pass, I am going to support the entire bond regardless. But if for some reason Wyman did not pass, maybe because of the difference in dollars, then we could easily still build an elementary and tweak it for Wyman. I'm for all of the campuses basically being equal, you know, I mean, it would be perceiving them as being equal, neighborhood schools being equal, and all kids getting the same education. I mean, I personally don't feel like the building is what matters, it's the teachers and the relationship with the kids. So, I mean, we've got great teachers at Wyman, but they'll be great. They're great right now in the oldest building in the district. So they'll be great wherever. Does that
Yes, sir.
make sense?
I understand.
What about C? Well, anybody's already specifically talked about how C is presented.
I just, on C, my business mind comes back to me that we could just, my only requirement is, and I think we've addressed it, but I'm gonna say it. I hate speaking all the time, as most of y'all know that started with me, I try not to talk a lot. But those depreciable assets have got to be structured financially where we're not paying for them over extended periods of time. You know.
That's one of the, not only legal requirements, set up by the legislature, but one of the benefits that we have with our good financial status right now, especially in the INS fund, is that we can front load some of that right now.
But you know that, and I know that.
And I know that.
And he
I know
knows
the
that,
answer. We're
and
just
we're
trying to
going
make
to
sure
that, but the
everybody
public
else
needs to know
knows
that.
that.
Understand?
You know what I'm saying? That's the big thing.
I have a question about facility upgrades, and I apologize if it's been asked before, but if you included, because you have to separate, like if we had Lumpkins as a separate, so facility upgrades couldn't include upgrades at WHS for athletic purposes.
Those were not, we clearly,
I'm just,
I
Saying
think
legally.
legally, we have to structure it on a.
It has to be separate.
If I'm-
No, I'm asking too, I think that's what you're asking, it has to be a standalone.
Right, that's what I'm asking is, could facility upgrades include something that has to do with athletics?
Okay, mind you, I have 0 legal training, which is why Mr. Golbus is here. Generically speaking, if it's one of the required things that the legislature says has to be a separate prop, then yes, we would not be able to spend any money on any of those things. That being said, when you get to athletics, you're generally speaking of a stadium. You're talking about
Right.
something that's gonna seat more than 1,000 people. Could you go in and could you make a modification to a gymnasium at WHS? You could. That's not one of those legally required things. But when we start talking a teacherage, we go, hey, we're 4 years into it. Man, sure would be nice if we could build some housing for our teachers because we can't attract anyone here. One of those legally required things, you would not be able to do that. If that, silly example that doesn't fully address what you're asking, but stadium is about the largest athletic prohibition. And so, no, we would not be able to sink Lumpkins into Prop C and then go do renovations to Lumpkins, per se, no. Because that would be a stadium seating more than 1,000 required some prop.
Were you referencing that, or were you referencing doing it?
I'm sorry.
So were you referencing doing that at the Lumpkins, or are you thinking about doing that at the
At the high school.
That's what,
Right.
I think that's what house you was asking.
And I'm
about.
with you on
I
that.
get it.
If we go by our history, just 2 years ago, when we had that bond, we had a component in there for building a multi-purpose dressing facility at WHS, right? It wasn't standalone.
The rules were not,
Yeah, they changed it.
they
They
changed the
changed
rules
it
last legislation.
I'm on track with Melissa though.
I mean, so, I'm
Yeah,
not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think, just trying to say is, could you take, I don't remember what that number was.
6.6.
Okay, that $6 million, add it to the facility upgrades number, and take care of the issue of getting the kids back at high school. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I'm just saying.
Well,
is
here's
it-
my problem. I don't honestly know what it's gonna take
Okay,
at WHS to solve that because that hasn't been on the table at this point.
okay,
We did not, we literally,
but from a structural standpoint, from a bond proposition,
Legal
structural.
I would
standpoint,
defer
legal
at that point.
I would just caution against us calling an audible though like that without us having the opportunity to go back and, as we talked about, let's develop a plan.
yeah, but we lumped it into just calling it land purchase and without having a plan. I mean, we put that 6.6 into calling it something different between the last time and meeting this
Yes, sir.
time, so. I mean, I'm on track with her line of thinking is, and I had wondered that myself. Could it not be part of an expansion or renovation to get them back over there?
So now I can say something about,
Absolutely.
okay,
You can say something anytime you want to.
but this is about Lumpkin, so and that's on the same, that's what I was gonna say. And I know we haven't even discussed it, but would that amount do what Mrs. Ford was talking about? We don't know. Well, why can't we find out? I mean, because the safety of our kids is of utmost importance.
I
So,
was caught a little off guard, because I've always been under the assumption that that had to be on a separate proposition. Now that you got my attention, when you say it doesn't necessarily have to be.
That's because it's not staying.
it's gonna, I mean, truly, it's gonna depend on what the project entails.
I understand.
So, not to get way ahead of it, but to answer your question, could we do something for $6.5 million?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Could we do something that gets students back to WHS? Most likely.
For less than that number?
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
So then you start getting into what's the overall plan for getting students back to WHS and advancement of the football program. That's when you're gonna start having to prioritize things within your 6.6 million. So could we do something? Absolutely. It may not be the end all be all. We may have to be revisiting this in multiple propositions, which that was kind of the original proposal that Dr. Hollingsworth was talking about was, hey, let's sit down with the athletic director and come up with a holistic vision to say, this is what our vision for WHS is, for football at WHS. Here's what we think the price tag is gonna be, and here's how we get it done. So, absolutely, we could, you could, leave that as its own proposition or put it into something else. We just don't have the plans to do anything with that at this point. So that's gonna be developing that on the fly, which LRPC hasn't really heard at this point. You
Just
know what
to
I
be
mean?
clear, and to add on to that, the LRPC's the conversation with the LRPC was about preparing Lumpkins for 2 high schools. That was the gist of it. Now, it shifted a little bit. Certainly today, our discussion has shifted to being about that and how we can get, and Mr. Schoolfield brought that up at our last workshop, how to get WHS back over. But our main conversation with LRPC was about preparing for 2 high schools.
I think you're,
Mr. Rogers had something you wanted to say?
I'm sorry.
So I know we have to think about land. I mean, there's not a whole lot of sense in passing a bond for a building if you don't have a place to put it. So I know we're trying to address that as well. Are we still counting on the one location that we currently have in our ownership for an elementary school? The 2?
So right now, putting the cart way in front of the horse from a slide perspective, we have 3 pieces of land where we could put an elementary and a promise of a 4th. But realistically, those are for elementaries. We do have the 174 acres that we are planning to put comprehensive high school number 2 on and junior high number 4 on. But that's it. That exhausts all of the land that the district has at this point. So that's where
So
the,
is Saddlebrook still in the equation?
Saddlebrook's the promised land, yes, sir.
Okay.
So specifically talking about land acquisition for what type of grade level? High school, elementary, or junior high?
So right now, depending on what would come available, we would look at how we could best utilize that 6.6 million. If we have set asides from developers and they're willing to donate it for an elementary site, then we wouldn't go out trying to front load a bunch of elementary sites. We know that at least from Emory Lakes, we know they have 0 interest in donating junior highs and or high school sites to us. They are willing to build that into the plan of their development, but they're not willing to donate it. So at a bare minimum, I would be thinking of that 6.6 to make sure that we had elementaries, if not donated, we would be able to go after those and then start working for junior high number 5.
Can I ask when that decision was made to take that and buy the land? Because that's new tonight.
Absolutely. It is new and it's based off of the feedback we got at the last board meeting. So just kind of listening to the conversations that you guys were having about concerns of not really addressing the football issue, the WHS football issue, still transporting students back and forth. That's something that administration got to work on, and that was just a solution that was thrown out there of, hey, this is one thing that we could look at, is we really don't have a whole lot of extra land.
I thought what we talked about was that the high school, the second high school's quite a ways down the road, and so we really wouldn't need to make those upgrades right away. But I don't remember ever talking about trying to solve the situation of safety and doing something at the high school.
I don't know, I mean, I'm remembering a conversation or comment that Mr. Schoolfield made about how he
Yes.
really wanted us to solve that. And then, so that just kind of stuck with me because that sounded out of all the comments that were made of, hey, you know what, we really are not addressing WHS long-term. It's really, we're addressing a stadium, but we're not addressing WHS and the football program long-term. And so that was a decision that I made, and I suggested to Dr. Hollingsworth to say, hey, he said, you know, let's spend some more time coming up with a plan with the new athletic director. I said, okay, if we're going to do that, can I have that for land? Because we really do not have, you know, many land sites going forward.
Do you remember what the number was on the turf on the practice fields?
Ooh, I don't honestly, I believe last, if I remember correctly, it was like $3.5 million for the stadium itself and finishing it out in locker rooms, and about $3 million for the turf, the practice areas with turf, if I remember
You
that.
played, tell me, because I talked to somebody today that.
I played and coached both. I mean, I'll just go online. I can't support putting turf down here because you're not solving anything. You're not fixing anything. And I'm not telling you I don't like football. I love football. I'll run into a tree and play football all day. I'm 54, so I can't walk, you know. But these kids are driving back and forth, and this, in stereo to me, is the same thing with baseball. This is the same conversation. I just haven't brought them in.
Golf's
They don't have a weight room.
Yes.
That gets kids hurt because they're not really prepared to play. And I think that's really more of a problem with baseball than it is with football, if you want to know the truth. But you dump $3 million into turf down here that you're busing kids to, you can take that money and you can go out there where you already have turf. There's ample practice facilities out there as far as fields if you arrange your practice schedule correctly. And put that into something that you can get those kids. And I'm baseball too. I mean, in my feeble mind, I see a boys area, because if you could pull those boys out of that other room, then you're gonna free your girls up too. You put them all down there. And at that point too, your football coach and your baseball coach are gonna have to understand, hey, buddy, we're sharing a weight room.
There are multiple factors that
There's a lot.
we have to address relative to Lumpkins and WHS boys athletics.
Yeah, and if you get those guys over there, we have a nice dressing room down here. I mean, it's not the greatest, but if you're gonna get ready for a game, I got ready a lot worse. I got ready worse when I played in college, to be quite honest with you. You have a nice facility down there that you can get dressed for, and they're not gonna both play on the same night.
I guess
You
what I
know,
was
and I'm
wondering-
not saying we shouldn't fix the other locker room long-term either. That's not what I mean. But I'm just saying, to me, I'm buying my kids donuts before I fed them supper.
Where I was gonna go with that was, I'm just kind of talking out loud, because there's parents that they had 200 kids between JV and varsity practicing on that one field at one time. I don't know if that's a ton or not, it sounds like it, but.
That's a lot, but very rarely in a football situation are you using the whole field. I mean, they spread offenses a lot more than they did when I was playing. But, typically those guys are broken up in position groups.
I think they're gonna have 300 next year, so I just kind of want to throw that out there to see.
Yeah, and
You're probably the only one that can speak to it on the board.
And there's more room out there where you could do other things too, But I mean, your indoor practice facility there at WHS isn't used by football very much. It's not even tall enough to throw the ball in, to be quite honest with you. I'm old and have a bad shoulder and I can get to it.
Y'all are having many of the same the conversations, Mr. President, that we had as an administrative team in the last 2 weeks. Really spurred by Mr. Schoolfield's question. And so I just want to reiterate, we commit to bringing to the board this summer a comprehensive plan relative to how we will deal with Lumpkins and how we will address boys' athletics and alleviating that travel concern by the summer. But
So could we take this, could we look at taking this and doing something else? So it won't be such a long, drawn-out thing?
So, I'm not trying to change the subject, but I would really like to change the subject and then come back and visit this. If everybody's in agreement, I would really like to try to get figure out how we want to go with that.
Gotcha.
Once we get done with that, you guys want to come back to athletics, I got no issue with that whatsoever. I would like to try to figure out where we're gonna get with A.
I'd really like to see if Debbie asks a question, for us to address Debbie's question before somebody else chimes in too.
Which particular question?
She asked if this could not be
Added to,
added to this.
you talking about from a legal standpoint, or?
No, I mean, a
We're the ones that
proposition
make-
all by itself.
We're the one that make the decisions on what we're
Yeah.
gonna move on.
Yeah, we are. So, but let's go back to A.
So, back to, we're going to assume for now that the land for future school sites is not on there, because that's gonna be a
Right.
topic for a later discussion, depending on where we go with that athletic park. I'm all ears. And I told you where I stand. I'm perfect, I would prefer it to be split up, but I'm not gonna down the sword for it. I'm perfectly fine with it if that's what the majority wants. Rarely will you hear me say that, but that's where I stand on that one.
And Mr. President, I would just add in, we had a 75-member community committee that spent months putting together a comprehensive plan.
Sure.
And I just, for example, I mean, to Mr. Rogers' point, you pull it out and then, then we'll be in that position that you talked about with that particular entity that, so the way we structured it here, quite by design, was to ensure that in the event that one of the others does not pass, you still are able to put the plan in place. We can move forward with building elementaries and expanding our junior highs and providing relief at WHS, even if B did not pass or if C did not pass. And that was very, very intentional. So I really want to caution against that because that really moves us away from what the LRPC recommended.
I'll start then, and
Okay.
I'll say the same thing you did. If the majority wants something else, then I'm fine with it. But since all that was part of the plan, and it's all educational based, and we could talk till we're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, coming out of our pockets per month, what you said, $5.61. Let's do it, let's get it all done, and I just think it's cleaner with one lump sum for all the educational facilities, but that's just not me.
I say leave it.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll come back and revisit the last part of A, based on what we got.
I do have a question. The way we set up our A, B, C, are we implying a, this is the most important? I don't
The
know.
perception
No,
of-
but can you?
Regardless of how we.
The board can arrange the propositions however you like. Typically, not always, typically they'll go big to small in terms of
Okay.
dollar amount.
Okay.
Otherwise, there may be some local strategy involved of priority. There's no right or wrong thing, and you may second guess however you decide. Like I said, typically it goes large to small. There is a concept of ballot fatigue. The further and further you go, people just start voting no, because I already voted for the other one. And then, but as far as from a legal perspective, it's purely the board's decision.
All right, so we've got the bulk of what we want to get accomplished tonight. All right, now we can go back to the previous discussion, and I don't know, who wants to start that particular discussion?
Well, I'm going back to what I said a minute ago. Can we look at if that amount, since we've already got it there, would do that at the high school for the safety?
That's a question for administration.
And I know what the LRPC said, but it's to benefit athletics. So anyway.
Well, we could entertain, and this is not a recommendation necessarily, just a thought. We could entertain, if you wanted to, just at the board's discretion, you want to change that to WHS athletics improvement. And you change that, and you could potentially, I'm just talking, I mean, this is
I'm
just a
just
thought.
afraid then
Yeah.
that will put it as a separate proposition if you say WHS athletic improvement. I don't know.
That's,
I mean, with what the legislation was.
It isn't per se athletics by itself need a separate it really depends on the scope of each individual facility.
It would be one facility, so how quick can someone get us a scope?
Well, it's not in terms of scope of project, so here it is in a 30-second nutshell. When we got Senate Bill 30, the arbiter of all of these is the Office of the Texas Attorney General. And since we got Senate Bill 30, which requires separate propositions, we've had now 4 election cycles to work our way through. We've had some written guidance, formal and informal, based on other elections done around the state. Their focus the last 2 election cycles has been more on the groups that the facilities are intended to benefit. The more narrow, that it's for a particular program, whether it's football or baseball, the OAG views that as a recreational facility requiring a separate proposition. Projects that are more expansive in scope for the campus, like a playing field or practice facility that band, football, soccer, everyone can use, lends itself to not needing its own proposition. Stadiums are a whole nother example that's pretty clear there. We can get very much in the weeds, and it's all dependent on the scope. Our goal is always to not get too cute with the analysis, but defensible in the analysis.
I think one of the main reasons that we were really wanting to delay on that decision, with having a new athletic director coming in, is we did not want to look back in retrospect, particularly when you go and build a second comprehensive high school. You build a second comprehensive high school, and we're gonna do it right, you know, obviously. We've learned some things, and we would make sure that whatever we do at the second comprehensive high school ensures that we're able to, for example, have football practice on that campus, period. You know, whatever our capacity needs are in our locker room spaces, our coaching spaces, et cetera. And so we just were feeling like we would be rushing that decision. There's a scenario, for example, we know there's phase 2 of this 17,000 plus student plan. Phase 2 that includes 2 more elementary schools and junior high number 4. And at that time, we absolutely can come back and say, and here's the real upgrade that we need to make to Waxahachie High School to make it right. And that may be significantly more than $6 million is my point. We could, that may be a $20 million proposition to come back and say, for us to do what we need to do on this campus. So that was kind of, we're saying, yeah, you could do something perhaps with $6 million, you can do something with $2 million, certainly. But is it going to be what we want long-term? And that was some of our concern, that we don't want to force a decision, rush a decision on doing something at WHS because we have to call a bond by February 17th. So that was some of our concern.
I don't know if we could get the scope of the deal prepared and properly vetted by them, you know, I mean.
Get a ruling
Oh.
on that.
No, we talking about the scope of the work, I think.
Building to get it real process.
I did want to mention earlier when we were talking about everything's about football, but we do have another football that plays at Lumpkin Stadium, and that's the lady in the soccer team plays there also. So anything, you know, we would have to address them also.
So what year would that be?
Well, what I've been telling our folks, obviously, is and just kind of our preliminary conversations with Mr. Alvis, is we believe you're looking at in about 4 years that we would be having another discussion about a subsequent bond to finish out that 17,000 student plan.
I mean, are you talking about 4 years before we'll do anything at the high school?
No, ma'am, not necessarily. And
Okay,
that was
that's why I was
why,
asking.
yeah, and that was one of those things where we were talking about with Ryan earlier. There are some things that we might be able to do in the interim that we really wanted to leave a blank slate open for our new athletic director and our team to come together and say, okay, here's how we want to address Lumpkins and 2 schools playing there, and here's how we want to address this transportation issue, which is in getting our kids back on campus.
I hear you on that timeline, but if you heard those people speak, they don't wanna wait 6 years. They don't wanna wait 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and I wasn't necessarily saying that that's what the case would be, but yes, sir, I understand that.
Dr. Hollingsworth, where would we, if we don't put it somewhere in the bond package, where would we get the funds to renovate? I mean, it needs to be in the bond package somehow in order to have the funds
Well,
to do what the new athletic director says.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that Mr. Calden was talking about is that through this, since you're handling some of these things that we pay for on an annual basis, $1 million at a time. You know, he saves $1 million or $1.5 million, and we go and we fix a roof, or we buy 20 new air conditioners, those kinds of things. Since you're handling some of these things in bulk, it would give you greater flexibility with those funds that we've been using for things like that. We could use it toward addressing some of these issues related to the high school. You've talked about, Mr. Schoolfield, a lower cost option where we do something similar to what we did with the ag
Well,
barn.
that's what I was gonna say, I try not to open a can of worms, but I mean, we built the ag barn, it's on record right now for $4.9 million. And it was, other people were sitting in this room during those meetings, The big contractors, that thing's pushing close to 10. It's about 8, so half. I think it's a very nice facility. I hate saying numbers right now, I look at them, but I have a number. You can do it. It can be done.
And I think that was gonna be part of our conversation, that we would have, you know, our athletic director.
I think that people gotta understand, if you do that, like you did for the ag department too, you gotta realize it's kinda like a cakewalk, you know? The music is playing and then all of a sudden it stops and you get to sit down in a chair and you get the free cake like at the carnival. You know, it might not be the flavor you want, or it might not be quite as big as you want, but I think you can address the nuts and bolts of it and do just like they've done and add their furnishings inside and stuff out of their budget over time. And it's very functional now, a year or two into it, but and to me, it's the best thing to do to taxpayers. I have to write the check every year. You know, I don't want to pay for it 30 years.
Coming into this workshop, I wasn't particularly fond of having a proposition specifically for Lumpkins and or athletics, but with the kind of curveball that was thrown to me tonight and tell me that it can be included in the facility upgrades, it's got my attention.
I'm not afraid to look at that either.
It's got my attention, and it's seriously got my attention. I'm completely surprised that it's kind of taking a turn that way. It does. It really does.
Well, Dusty, if you can remember at the last meeting, you asked, could this be the Lumpkins, could that be out of the budget? And Ryan said no. It would take away from teacher raises and all that. But now you're saying it can be?
Well, he addressed that earlier, yes, ma'am?
So it's not, would we have 6 million sitting up front to do this? Absolutely not. Is it something that we could put money aside and phase into and try to recapture some funds that aren't being spent this year to put towards that project? Absolutely. And so as we take some of these expenditures like facility improvements off of the M&O budget, that frees up some more money to go and try to do these things. But my response last time was, I will not have $6.5 million up front to go and do these things. I don't honestly foresee us getting $6.5 million built up in the fund balance as a growing district anytime soon to go through and do that Lumpkins project just out of M&O money.
Well, I still think we need to do something to take care of the problem. Because it's a big one.
I've done this before in a previous workshop we had years ago, and I'm gonna do it again. It's it's kind of unorthodox, but I'm gonna ask somebody in the crowd. You guys, you have anything you want to chime in on as we discuss this?
I do have a couple of things.
Stand up, talk to us.
Believe it or not. You know, we keep talking about the new athletic director. And I think we have a very equipped head coach that can probably bring solutions to us. I think he's even given something that said a turf field is about 800,000. So I don't think it's gonna be the 3 million that has been talked about. And can we not, I mean, I know the LRPC, I was on it, I know how it all went, but can we not add a little to this? I mean, is this number set in stone? We couldn't put maybe another 5 million with it somehow? And can we not go ahead and get the funds for this new athletic director and say, hey, here's what we have. Can you do this for us? Have it for him ready to go. So, because if we wait for the next bond election, our voters aren't gonna want another big bond, and they're probably gonna vote down the little bitty one. So let's go ahead and get it in this. Because if we wait, that's 10 years our boys have been off campus. That's 10 years we've been busing them. So I mean, as a parent, I'm like, let's think about a little bit different ways to do this. I'm a taxpayer, I'll be writing the check too. But can we look at ways that we can, it'll be a savings to y'all, you won't be busing them, it's a security issue. You know, they will all be back on campus. And the renovations to Lumpkins, we have some time to do that. And we might not even need that much if they're not there. They're back on WHS. I don't know, that's just my questions. Can we add a little bit more to it if we had to? Can we get the funds already for the new AD to work with when he gets here? And use Tolly as a resource to help us see what we can do. I mean, we hired him for a reason. I mean,
coach of the year, so let's see what he can bring to us with this. My other parents might have something to add as well.
Yeah, I think waiting for the new athletic director is a mistake, right? We're talking about a small sliver of an improvement that needs to be done. We're not talking about changing the path of what that athletic director could add to the table when they're hired, right? We're talking safety of kids should be utmost, very important thing that we really look at. A weight room, right, can be used by really everybody, right? It doesn't have to be just for football. But the safety of the kids and just waiting for the athletic director to be hired, you're gonna vote on $570 million and then bring another vote to something for athletics. The appetite for that to get approved will not fly.
I'm gonna piggyback on this safety feature.
You don't have to come all the way, just a little bit closer.
Okay, we're all parents, we all love these kids. There's so much safety matters that we watch for these kids. We're scared of credible threats for our kids, not knowing if we should go pick them up or not pick them up. We have young drivers that are distracted by butterflies. To be quite frankly, you have them driving in all different weather conditions to go to a stadium to practice and then come back. Or even us as parents knowing, okay, are you at the stadium or are you at the school? There's an emergency, I've got to get to my child. Where is my child? Safety's number one. I'm sorry, you can't replace my son. And there is a weight facility there at the indoor facility. I'm not sure who uses it really, because I have seen it. So, how can we not expand that to be something bigger so we can use that? For everybody, not just the boys, girls too. We have girl football players.
Let's correct what was done inadequately when we built it. Let's make it right. So we're equitable to the new high school coming online.
We're already behind.
Mm-hmm.
WHS is behind. We can't just keep trying to play catch up because you're never gonna get there. We gotta do something to make a huge leap forward so that when this new facility, the new high school with all of its brand new bells and whistles is created, that WHS is not lacking. We can't keep perpetuating this. We need to do something now about it.
And we also want to set up the new athletic director for success.
Yes.
We don't want to have them come in and waste time and say, okay, what are we going to do now? When he could be moving way steps ahead.
Only thing I want to say, I do work for the ISD and work in facilities. So the facilities upgrade is a big issue for our department. You don't understand that. I sat here in August last year and presented to you what we've done in the last 3 or 4 years. I hear people talk about the $1 million for a roof. I watch those projects. I oversee those projects. The flooring, I oversee those projects. Understand when Mr. Calden says he may have some money to free up. That word may is a very big word. If C fails, you don't have that extra money. You don't have that $1 million to go do something because we have to spend it on a roof. We have to spend it on air conditioning units. There's not that money. So understand if facility upgrades was to fail, that extra money that y'all are wanting to use to help the safety here is not going to be there. Or you're not going to upgrade your facilities. Something has to give there. That's the big issue that I think a lot of people don't see that size picture of that is. I don't disagree with what they're saying, believe me, I don't disagree with what they're saying on the safety. But I just want everyone to understand is, if you pull C out and you put it by itself and it fails, you don't have that $1 million that Ryan talks about, or $1.5 million that they're talking about to use, because we have to use it to upgrade facilities, air conditioning units that are going out, roofing that's going out. Those are big things that, as Dr. Hollingsworth said, they're not sexy things, but they're things that have to be done. You talk about the education of every kid in this district, that has to be done. And for those that are going around, if you've gone to some of the schools that we've put flooring in, that's pretty sexy looking. I will tell you, the flooring does. It changes the look of that building. Those kids, those teachers like that. The roofing, they don't see, but it is a need. And that's something you have to look at. That facility upgrades is a big deal. For our department, it's a huge deal. And for to how you have a 100-year-old building you're still in, That's because facility upgrades had to be done during those times. So that, understand, like I said, if that one fails, we lose a lot of money elsewhere. And that's one thing I think people need to understand.
So in the interest of time and making sure that we vet this as much as we possibly can, we have another workshop scheduled for Wednesday, okay? I think 4 o'clock, correct?
Yes, sir, and there's already been some preliminary work that was done a couple of years ago on what would need to happen at WHS. And so that's a starting point for us, and so what we can do is we could bring to y'all just that topic, because what I've heard y'all say is we're good with A, B, and C as they show up here
That's
on
what I've
this
heard.
page, yes, sir.
That's
Okay.
what I heard.
And then we can bring y'all a minimum of 6.6, right? But to include into facility upgrades, that's what I'm hearing. We would include it in that Proposition C, facility upgrades, and we would come up with a number that is viable for Waxahachie High School, and bring that back to you to add to the $60,689,000.
That's what I hear.
Okay? And we,
Is that what
does that make
everyone else
sense?
is hearing?
Mhm.
And we bring that back to y'all on Wednesday with that being our sole topic. We'll invite Mr. Aldis to come back if he can. So,
Everybody in agreement with that?
I'd like to know how much of our facilities are open at this time, because I believe all of our playing fields, I believe everything, I mean, I think that's one thing we need to know is how much we have, how many openings we have in the day. I mean, you know, on our indoor, on our practice fields. So is there gonna be a practice field where we can put a football team to practice, or you know?
well, there's absolutely space on
See,
the,
that's what I
on the
don't.
practice fields, yes ma'am, and WHS, yes
I
ma'am.
don't, that's what I don't.
Yes, ma'am.
Alright, so that's what we're gonna do on Wednesday. We've agreed on A, B, and C, with C to be a number to be amended at our next workshop on Wednesday.
Okay, are we gonna have the land on A, or no? No land?
I would doubt it, depending on what the number comes out to see. But I guess that could be you want that topic for discussion as well?
Well, we actually had planned for y'all to give us some input on the elementary sites. And so
Okay.
if we can go into that conversation, Mr. President?
All right.
Okay. All right. And you want to, come on, you can drive.
Yeah, just to address Ms. Ford's comment, there's nothing special about the 576. It's not like your cap, that's not your limit, you can go above it, you can go below it, that's just what LRPC considers.
Recommend.
Okay, Board, you've seen a map like this before with our demographic updates. So from our demographer, the yellow are the big future developments that we're looking into. I'm looking at Kemp Ranch, as I say big, but the green ones are the ones that are the more active ones right now, and then the red outlines are where the groundwork is underway. So you see it's all across the district. It's hitting every single zone as we go through, but I'm showing you this for a couple of slides from now when we start talking about where our land is. Want you to see kind of where we are. I got word today from the demographer that we are slowing down from where we have been the last couple of years with our closings and our starts. I believe that is a reflection of how gangbusters we went for a while and kind of where the economy is at this point. So we are slowing down, which is a little bit of good news. We're not going to be quite as scarily behind in some of this stuff. But you still see a lot of future sites, especially at Clift, not nearly as many at Shackelford, and a good number at Wedgeworth. And that, again, Wedgeworth's taking in that Emery Lakes, that Kemp Ranch, and then Clift has a lot of area that we believe is to be developed rather soon. So on this slide, there are 4 little stars, and we have 3 yellow ones and a red one, and these are the 4 parts of land, 3 that we own and 1 that has been promised to the district that we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Each of these, this is possible locations of an elementary school. Kind of wanted to walk through this with you. This is right across the street from WHS, so that's right off of Business 287. This area down here by the creek, this is kind of in that flood zone, but all of this area up here is outside of the flood zone. So it would be land that we could build on. Red star, meaning this is kind of where we're currently envisioning where Wildman Elementary might go. general idea of right there, kind of, you know, for people to see, easy to access off of 287, all that that would go with that site. Current unknowns on that site, we're not exactly sure what TxDOT would require of us for acceleration and deceleration lanes on that site. A lot of work that we would have to go through as we are looking into the cost of that building. There's a lot of contingency built in right now because there are so many unknowns. So part of that, when you see that $12 million delta between elementaries 10 and 11 and Wildman, some of that is unknowns. We just don't know what exactly is going to be required on this site because it's a relatively new concept of building a new Wildman STEAM Academy. It didn't change a whole lot. Elementary site 10. So this is one option of where we could put an elementary site. This is on the other side of the high school in the agri-science facility behind the apartment complex that's right there in the same general area. When Dr. Kane was here, we kind of talked about maybe possibly putting an elementary on that site. We know with high school students and elementary students, different arrival and dismissal times, so we don't expect that that their paths will be intermingling too terribly much, that we'd be getting students on campus at the high school after the parents had dropped off students for elementary, and then parents with their students would be vacated out of the elementary campus before high school would be dismissing. Yes, sir.
Does that development that's coming in there, is it gonna have a road that connects to the backside?
Good question. So our expectation in talking with the city is there is supposed to be a road that goes right through there that would be between the elementary and the apartment complex back there. When that's coming in, I have no idea, because I believe last I got an update from the city, developers are pointing to the city to put in the bridge because it doesn't benefit their developments at all, and the city is pointing back at them and saying, no, you guys do it. So I don't know where any of that is, but yes, last I understand that was part of the master plan in that area to have a divided boulevard type road coming in, I believe.
Ron,
Yes,
how
ma'am.
much land is that, that's not in the flood zone?
Over on this left side?
On the
Oh,
right
I
side?
went back. Okay.
None of that's.
You're good.
None of that.
Okay.
So
You're up on the hill.
this is about 220 acres. When we bought it, it was about 220 out of 310.
Right.
This is about 90.
Okay.
On this site, you've got about 60 acres that are not in the floodplain or would not require remediation to be usable space.
Okay.
Some of that, you know, we were talking at one point about a transportation depot. Parking lot can be in the floodplain.
Right.
You just got to watch it when it rains. But on this side of the road, nothing is in a floodplain.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. And so there's
for-
about 90 acres over there?
Yes, ma'am. So there's about 90 acres on this side. It does go out to the creek or goes right out to the train tracks in certain areas. On this side, we've disturbed about 110 acres between the high school and the agri-science facility. So you've got about 110-ish,
Okay.
give or take rough math, left on that side. And then again, about 90 acres on the other side.
Okay, thank you.
So elementary option number one, this is the area of Saddlebrook, the Saddlebrook development. We have been promised about 15 acres over at Saddlebrook. That is all contingent on us having the funding to build an elementary school, so I can't tell you that I have a deed in hand. But that is a possible location. This would be on the extreme eastern side of our district, as to where that first site option is on the extreme western side of our district. If we're really honest with each other, you've seen the real three viable options for elementaries. The last one, in the interest of just being honest, here's all the land that we own. Here's the 174 acres. I have no roads, I have no utilities, so it's really not a viable option, but those are the four pieces of land that we own as a district. So as we were talking about, you know, pushing Lumpkins a little bit and developing a more comprehensive plan, this is why I was recommending and pushing in there, hey, can we buy some land? Because we really don't have any in the hopper if we need to build an elementary and we don't get land from a developer.
But one of the things we really want to go ahead and get Wyoming location nailed down and elementary number 10 site nailed down, just in the interest of being able to hit the ground running in June, so that we can, you know, really get things rolling. And so we really wanted to just get y'all's feedback, your thoughts on that. You know, there's some drawbacks on each. You could do the two up there at the high school site, and people are going, why the heck are they putting two right there together? You know, and that's an obvious. The other problem, Saddlebrook, is right now, Saddlebrook's not going to fill up a school. So you're going to draw some pretty long attendance zones that I would expect, I don't
And
know
we
this
could
for a
put-
fact, but I would expect might pull in off Broadhead Road, for example.
Yeah.
So you've
He's
got.
putting another little star right over there for Clift. That'll be a zoning, fun time.
And for Wyman, to be a school of choice and taking kids from all over the district, whew, that's just like the high school way out there.
It is out there, but we do that with the high school every day. We take kids from everywhere,
I
so
know.
it becomes
And
a.
with the transportation hubs, there would be, coverage for students from all zones to go.
The other thought there too, though, Ms. Timmerman, was that is for families that do transport kids to that site. For a lot of our folks, that's a stop off on their commute. You know, a lot of folks are.
I would just throw out there that, traffic is already an issue at Waxahachie High School, so, if that school's ready to go and we don't have a second high school yet, we're definitely gonna need to think about that, because I'm envisioning.
As far as those two locations, I would be in favor of being across the highway. Not both, but just across the highway.
Okay, so with the STEAM Academy or elementary
I
10?
think for one, but it doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I think it alleviates a little bit of the traffic. You're gonna have all elementary on one side, all high school kids theoretically on the other. You got two different dismissal times.
Okay.
So, I don't know if these numbers were included in your starts, but they're at Saddlebrook, just to the west of Saddlebrook, it'd be kind of the northwest.
Yes, sir.
There is a development they are anticipating breaking ground by the second quarter of this year. And it's about 1,500 acres, and it's already platted. And their plans are to start in the second quarter. If that happens, your school's gonna be full by the time you start coming over
So that would make that a viable one.
Without a doubt.
Yes, sir.
Without a doubt.
Okay, so the new high school, the 174 acres, how soon do we look for the city to, what's the word, loop it or?
To run the utilities.
Right.
So
And roads and everything.
the thing with the new high school right here is the senior citizen center. So I don't honestly know, because it has not really been, I don't have funding to get a high school or a junior high built on that area, but those are definitely conversations we'd be having with the city. My point in pointing that out, though, is not like it's with Waxahachie High School, where it was on the other side of 35 and they had to loop and it took the better part of a year for all that project to happen. This would be at the bordering property of that site, so it should be, in theory, a shorter turnaround when we're ready to have those conversations with the city.
Okay. I would think we'd be having them pretty quick.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back to that overview? It's got
Yes,
all
sir.
of them, please. Thank you, Ryan.
Was your question about utilities or a question about roads?
Well, both. I mean, just how
So,
soon will it be
we have
ready to
an
go to high
easement.
school?
So where we can build a road,
We do.
we have an easement. Utilities is a tentative agreement, that's not gonna be an issue. We have a tentative agreement with the city, with fire station and whatnot, so.
So, I'm sorry, I misheard that. Yes, the roads, we do have an easement that we could put in. I do not know TxDOT's schedule at this point in terms of, I would not imagine we would be putting in the entire 4 lanes that they're ultimately thinking of. My guess is we would do 2 because we don't build roads, but I don't know really what their timeline is on developing that out.
To be honest with you, I think the passage of a bond is going to speed up.
Right.
Yeah, they're sitting there waiting on that.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
They're saving.
So-
In And when we negotiated buying this property and kind of how it was set up, and the total number of acres, it was enough for a high school, a junior high, and an elementary school. Right. So, depending on the timing, you've got another spot for an elementary school.
This is true, absolutely.
Would y'all, right now, based on what we know right now, where we're at today, would you urge us to move in the direction of site for elementary number 10, neighborhood elementary number 10, being at Saddlebrook or at the 174
Saddlebrook.
High School? Saddlebrook.
Saddlebrook, that new knowledge, Saddlebrook.
Is it Saddlebrook and 287 bypass? I mean, business.
And without disclosing a whole lot of information, we have been working on trying to acquire another school site that obviously we can't disclose. We don't have anything signed, sealed, and delivered yet, so, which could potentially alleviate a lot more of these issues.
And that'd be an outstanding conversation to have about 11. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. So based upon that feedback, that's kind of the direction we'll start moving in, is Wyman, where that red star is, and elementary number 10 at the Saddlebrook location. Okay?
Thank you, Board.
Thank y'all very much. All right. And then we have our experts. I don't know if y'all have any other questions for Mr. Goldus or Mr. Alvis? Or we can go into the campus design exercise. How much time meaningfully do you need?
I will be under 15 minutes.
Okay?
We're not
Y'all-
designing the campus, we're talking about designing
Right,
the campus.
exactly.
Okay.
Are you good to move forward, Mr.
Absolutely.
President? Okay.
What we're here for.
All right. John? You. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Don't stay up there.
Lock in. Public.
Let's get your very short. Oh, there we go. Perfect, very good.
So good evening. I'll set the expectation, and the expectation is not that we're designing a high school tonight, but I wanted, Dr. Hollingsworth had been talking about just to convey to you guys kind of the design process and start to gather your initial input, so you have a feeling for how this process goes as we start to develop projects moving forward. Use the high school as kind of a case study here, because high schools are the biggest of everything, so they're much easier to have these conversations about. So I want to do two things, just very quickly run through some very simple terminology on architectural styles, and this is really exciting for you. We'll cover that very quickly, and then I'll cover kind of the process that we engage you guys in and the community in as a project becomes a design. And then I've actually got some homework that I want you to do for me here, just some quick notes while you're here. And you may be able to turn it in later. I'll talk to Ryan about that if you want to think about some things and write some things down. But I want to start very quickly and just say, pull together just some really four very generic, when we start talking about the exterior aesthetic of the building, this is always where clients jump to, is what is it going to look like. And when we talk about the design process, I'll just tell you, it matters what the inside is to tell you what the outside is like. But if we just want to talk about the outside of the building, just took four basic categories just to have a discussion about tonight to start you thinking down these lines, because we're not resolving this, but starting. Kind of talking in the four categories of classical. This is squarely WHS, classical / traditional, right? Contemporary / modern. We just grabbed some examples for you guys to look at, and I have a bunch of glossy pictures here for you to look at too. And you know the hallmarks of that. I'll point out a few things on these as we go into more detail, but classical you're pretty familiar with. This is Marvin, this is WHS. I struggled to find Clifton Feltian. There's you've kind of had everything that may not fall into any one of these 4 categories. Regional, I want to say regional, that's not about, you always hear this hill country modern, whatever, that's not what we're referring to. Regional means responding to the site, and that is particularly important at the high school site, because that's a really interesting site, as you guys know, pretty dramatic site. And so when we talk about regional, it's adapting elements of the building that match the site, whether it's view or topography, if you have a lot of grade. That's kind of what we mean. And then transitional is just a catch-all phrase that says it's not quite modern, it's not quite traditional, it may have red brick, which most people associate with that first category. So this is kind of ways we tend to think of things. Wanted to use an extreme example. This is not quite WHS number 2, just want to be clear. This is another high school that I chose mainly because it's the most spread out high school plan the way this client designed it. But it starts to address the issue you run into when you talk about a high school. Usually we think of that front door, that's the picture you have on your homepage is the front door. The reality is a high school has about 6 front doors if you think of it that way. Thinking about fine arts entry, athletics entry, how classrooms look, how STEM components look. At this campus, I don't know where there is. This is a CTE component, so think of WHS, the left wing of WHS. That's their CTE component. This is obviously fine arts, this is athletics, and this is purely academic. So when we think about it, every style is not just a monolithic building all the way around. There are different points of entry, especially if you think about athletic and performing arts entries. Those also need to have a look, an identifiable look, but you want your front door to stand out separately. So I'll go real quickly through the 4 styles we talked about, and we start thinking about classical. These are not to the extreme of WHS. I would say WHS is kind of at the end of the spectrum on classical traditional. We have stone columns, even Simpson falls in that category. Stone columns, red brick. There are elements in every one of these. It's a portion of classical. One thing that is specific when we think about classical is you start to look at classrooms, for instance, and windows are very predictable. That's kind of what people associate with more of a traditional look. They're very predictable, repetitive window pattern that makes sense. Scale is important. And entry is often defined by these larger elements, pieces like this. But these are key with the numbers on the previous page. You start to see, well, this is a front door aesthetic, fine art aesthetic. This is an athletic, that's a fine art aesthetic as well, athletic entries. But these are not necessarily your response, but they're ideas around classical. And you can see some of the elements there of red brick, and the stone tones. We've heard some commentary on that as we designed 10 in the past out here as well. Whereas when you look at more of a modern look, Sherman High School is an example of this. That's the floor plan I just showed you, the very spread out floor plan. Replacing, kind of like you did, replacing their high school with their newest high school, the first of many to come out there. And so you start to see classroom windows aren't so predictable. You play with the amount of glass, the type of materials even. This isn't even a brick material, this is more of a composite panel material. Regional, this is an approach just again to talk about how do you address the site in particular. For instance, on this facility, this faces north, and so you don't need shading over northern glass. And so on this facade, things are very different than on the other portions. This site is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime site that has this remarkable view off the side. And so that's more of what a regional response would be in elements like that. We walk through all of these, and then transitional, if you've seen Braswell High School in Denton, it's kind of a good example. Very predictable patterning. Windows are not treated traditionally. Brick and materials are a little bit different, but the composition of the plan is pretty much traditional. So it kind of falls in that transitional category. So what does that all mean when we start putting buildings together? Let me walk you through very quickly what that looks like when we start a design for a project, just so you have a feeling for it, how you can help us out with this. So the process we use is called launch, and that's a 2-part or 2-meeting process. And launch ranges from groups of 8 to as much as 80 to 100 people. It really depends on how many folks you want to get engaged. And that's a conversation we need to have with admin as well. Sometimes you don't want this to be a huge, it can be a little bit unwieldy. It can be very energetic, I'll say that. A launch with 100 people is a lot to control, but you get a lot of input. Launch is a 2-part process. Part 1, we bring people that you have identified. Sometimes that's students, it's staff members, it's community members, parents. Bring them in, and we have what we call gaming chips. So we have a piece that represents dining, gym. And you can see an example here. This is one of the boards they work with. I didn't bring you boards tonight, but imagine this room is filled with these printed boards. And what they asked them to do at a table is work with a group of 8 to 10 of the folks they've been introduced to that night and design the school. We show them the site plan, we show them access to roads, and we ask them to, at a very high level, you can see these big chunks of paper. This is the result at the end of a first session of Launch 1. On it, you'll see this is the team's response. They designed that, so their first mission for the night is to understand it, and then sit down and design it at their table. And so imagine this room full of 10 different groups working. After they've designed that, then we ask them to present it back to their peers, so everyone has a chance to express how they've designed and laid out that site. They also make kind of random notes, and then we ask the entire group to get up and do 2 different things. One, go vote for their top 3 designs, so they're giving feedback to their peers, they're asking questions. So those are the voting dots you see there. But then we also ask them to do an exercise that I'm going to hand you. We have several boards we put up called typology boards that talk about types of interior spaces. Tonight I brought you just the exterior typology images. And we asked them to vote on those also, but we also asked them to take a Post-it note. So I'm going to give you a little pack of Post-it notes and make notes on those boards for us. So when we leave, those exterior typology boards have hundreds of Post-it notes on them. And the interns love that because we come back and the interns get to type all that up and clarify that for us. So when we come back to meeting 2, what we found is by gathering that kind of feedback, where we're not calling on you, and we're calling on you to get your feedback, everybody gets to write what they like, what they don't like. If it's the light pole that you see, great, put a note about that. So gather all those data points. And then when we come back for Launch 2, our team will take what starts out as squares on paper and begin to start to finalize it. Usually the imagery we'll bring back to Launch 2 is not a computer generated, it's more of a hand generated. People tend to like that and respond to that better. But that's generated based off of all of the notes we get from your team when we go through that typology exercise. We've got a video that, go to the next one. This is an example that was just done on Liberty Hill a few months ago. Forewarned, it's not traditional. This is a whole new thing for them. They've gone in a whole new direction. But you can kind of see these are the typology boards I was talking about where people are voting, interacting. These are teams starting to lay out their concepts. We like to say we bring your people in and have them design the building for us. Really, we just kind of formalize it. We'll leave Launch 1 with our 3 highest vote getters. We'll spend the time in between Launch 1 and Launch 2 refining all 3 of those, and we bring all 3 back and represent them to the entire group along with an exterior aesthetic look. And from that, we should come out with a pretty resolved site plan, floor plan in the beginning of an exterior look. You can see there, it's a lot of people involved in the process. But as I said, one thing that's critical to that process is people giving feedback. So I have some pretty color images here. I could open it up to discussion. You guys are feel free to ask questions. But what I want to do is put these sheets in front of each one, and there's a bunch here. You can just focus on the first 2 sheets if you want, because it gives you a range, and it's what we use. I know it's late in the evening. But this is a typical board we would use, and so we hand people Post-it notes, and I'd like for you guys to do the same thing if you still have it you need to write at the end of the day. And what we generally ask for is any thought you have about anything in that image. What this will help you do also as we start to think about moving forward, when we get ready to put these image boards together to use with your group, we can tailor the imagery towards what you guys, as the Board of Trustees, you have a finger on the pulse of the community, and I'm hoping you can help us start to put imagery in front of them. So don't feel like you've got to write a million things, but if there's things you think that you need to know, this would be a good start on getting that from you guys. We all have pens, I believe, but I brought lots of pens too, just in case. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer on the process of what that might look like going forward.
John, you were handing that to Jonathan. Tell me, say one more time what you're asking him to do.
So anything about any of those images that you see that you think this is fantastic or I hate this, either one of those are valid commentary, and think pretty high level, right? Because when we're asking a committee to do this, we're asking them to think of it in context of a building that kind of helped us mass out and put together.
Really like this? No,
Yes.
not at all.
And we get great commentary all across. The students are the most brutally honest, I'll be honest with you. You bring an elementary kid in the room and the things they'll write on that board are great. So really you guys have a feeling what your community expects, or maybe what you expect. Either one of those is valid. But like I said, when we put images in front of that launch committee, should we bring a launch committee together? We want to make sure we have imagery that you're comfortable with, for instance, to have out there. Because I think you have a fairly traditional look for a reason. That's kind of been an expectation, at least for the last 20 years or so of projects. But that's all I'm looking for. Any thoughts you have on that will help us start to shape what that exercise looks like moving forward. And this is usually what we'll do before we'll engage with the public, is we'll talk to you and the administration to get a feeling of what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with.
Thing with the recent Uvalde and all the safety issues, has any of this changed? You know, as far as
not necessarily, because it was going to, it's glass safe. And we can have holes. Entrances are treated differently now, but honestly, with the ability to treat glass, you actually can have fairly visibly open vestibules that are treated as what we call hardened vestibules. And honestly, in most first responders' cases, one of the things they talk about is the ability of whoever's at the front of the building to see people even before they come in is something that they prize pretty highly. They would like for you to be able to see someone coming from the parking lot, and so that people even know they're being seen as they're coming into the building. So that's a conversation to have. You can apply the aesthetic to anything. You could make that a solid brick vestibule if you wanted to. That wouldn't be any sort of deal killer. But in a lot of districts, what they're treating vestibules now is a double lock vestibule. So you buzz to get into the first vestibule, and then you don't even get into the admin area now. You just do kind of a transaction window.
Right, I understand that. So they're not 8 doors or 10 doors or 15 or 20.
It's just a simple double pair of doors. You just never get inside and beyond that vestibule area. But that is a big part of the conference, especially in a high school. How do you secure it and lock down? And how do you make it feel like it's not as secure, but it is secure? And that's a fine line to walk with your community too. Sometimes when people see a lot of glass, that's the first thought is, well, that can't possibly be safe. And there are ways to address it. It's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. About 12 minutes. Sorry, kept it short. I appreciate it. So if there's any questions about process in general, launch for us is a framework. Like I said, we can tailor that. That can be, in some districts, they say, you know what, we'd like the administration to handle that. Perfectly valid, we can handle it with administration. Others open it pretty broad. Oftentimes, when we do replacement schools, you see a larger group brought in because there's people involved and invested in the buildings. So they kind of want to have a say in it. But there's trade-offs with all that. So really, we'll take our lead from you on how that works, but especially with high school number 2, that's always a huge deal in the community. That there's a lot of sensitive issues. Dr. Collingworth has done a good job of anticipating a lot of those. But it's a high-profile project anytime you do a high school, much less a second high school. That's probably the most high-profile.
Jonathan, not necessarily in the workshop, but if we had a particular school or two that we like, we really like this particular existing school, is that helpful sometimes?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like I said, as we start to tailor the imagery for the experience of whatever that group is, if there are those preference campuses, and I would say when designing a high school, long before this happens, the administration at a minimum needs to be touring. We'll set up tours of especially high schools throughout the state. Anything is on the table because we really want to talk through just organizing concept. And we gather that data, and that'll start to fill in images here. The things that you see, we'd like to get on these boards so your community has a chance to see even just visually what you guys have seen. So yes, if you already know of some, great. If not, we would not design a high school without going to see at least 5 high schools. People have a hard time seeing beyond what they already know, right? So we like to stretch that. That's usually for administration and board to do. It's kind of hard to put 100 people on the bus so they can go see 5 high schools. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
In the end, it's not our building, it's Waxahachie's building. I don't have a preference on architectural style in the least. Whatever is fitting for WISD, that's the style that we designed to. You tell us who that group is to help us inform that decision, and we'll make that come to life. It's your community's building, it's a lot of trust they put in you, and we're gonna push that right back to them and say, they're gonna tell us how this needs to be. And the process is built for that, so I'm not worried about that with whatever group you choose to proceed with, we can make it work.
I really like that process.
We had elementary kids, and it's always affirming to have an elementary kid involved in anything. It's kind of,
Yeah.
plus we tell the teachers, you're gonna do the work, we're just gonna document it. You guys designed the building, and they get to present to each other, they get to kind of answer questions to each other, their designs get better, just like any design, and people come out feeling heavily invested in the project. Suddenly they're really invested in the project because they had a lot to do with it, and it's a very quick way to get there. So,
I did that in the block.
yeah,
When we did that here.
yeah.
What's that?
I did that process with a Wyman deal, and so that obvious little boy, he's all in the middle of that.
That's awesome.
He presented for our group.
It's right up his alley.
Yeah, usually you have someone present, we usually make sure the students are the ones who present, because the adults are more civil when the students are presenting back. And that's the best commentary you ever get, is when an 8-year-old's defending their design in front of a group of adults, and they held their own, fantastic, so. It can tailor to you guys, but it's built to get your community's input and design a building they're happy with and they're proud of.
Thank you very much,
So
Tom.
that's on the horizon.
Appreciate that. We know what our marching orders are, Mr. President, and so we'll go to work and bring something back for y'all at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock on Wednesday?
Yes, sir.
Anything else? Anybody want to say anything for our adjournment? Everybody's good at 4 o'clock on Wednesday? We're going to have one topic. Okay, pretty much one. It could be 1 and 1A.
Here, right?
Yes, ma'am. We'll do it right back here. Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to bring our homework back, or is it, what is the deal with that?
This one.
Jonathan, you want to just take those from me?
If you leave them there, I'll grab them.
Okay.
If you just leave them at your place.
All right, if you want me to give it to you later, Kim, I can do
Yeah,
that
if you
too.
need to, if you want to study and take your time on it, feel free to bring them back, and I'll gather them.
And I'll get it to you, Ms. Creed.
I didn't want to make you rush and do it, so if you need to do it, that's fine.
Shoot.
Again, we're not designing tomorrow. I would need my glasses, because it's still a little too small for me.
At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yes, so.
Second.
Mr. Rogers, second by Ms. Timmerman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion carries 7-0.